Our readings today highlight the possibility of challenges in relationships. So I've got a little joke about that, and actually seminarian Giuseppe gave this joke to me, so I have to give him the credit. A parish was having a very heated debate over whether the church should install air conditioning. Half the people said, yes, it's too hot in summer and we can't focus on the Mass. The other half said, no way, we've survived without it for 100 years and it builds character. Finally, someone turned to the pastor and said, okay, Father, you have to decide, air conditioning or not? The pastor smiled and said, friends, I've really thought long and hard about this, and I've decided we're going to compromise. We will install air conditioning, but we'll only turn it on in the winter. Did you get it? In the winter, it's not very helpful to compromise. Okay, anyways. We all know that division happens. Sadly, we all know from experience the difficulty of strained relationships with family or friends, co-workers, you name it. And Jesus really does want us all to get along. He even says he wishes he could gather us all together, like a hen gathers her chicks. So why is getting along sometimes so difficult? Because we all do crave harmony in our relationships. We want peace in our homes, unity in our communities, world peace. And yet in today's gospel, Jesus says something that might shock us a bit. He says, I have come to set the earth on fire. Do you think that I have come to establish peace on the earth? He says, no, I tell you, but rather division. And he goes on and gives various examples. But wait a minute. Isn't Jesus the Prince of Peace? Didn't the angels announce peace on earth at his birth? How do we reconcile this Jesus who speaks of fire and division with the Good Shepherd who wants to gather his people together? Well, of course we know, when we take the whole Bible in context, Jesus deeply desires that we'd all get along. But he also knows that the human heart can sometimes be hard. Sometimes, no matter how hard we try, there are people who just won't understand us, or who will not love us the way Jesus teaches. And also, sadly, sometimes we are the ones who haven't loved others the way they should be loved. The human nature that each of us have is now broken ever since the time of Adam and Eve. And we see this on full display throughout the world. And so Jesus wants to heal this broken and divided world. But here's the thing. What happens if some people choose to be against Jesus, against the ways of God? That's what our readings highlight today. So first we heard from Jeremiah. We hear about Jeremiah. You can read the whole book. He's a very faithful prophet of God, speaking God's truth, even when the consequences are not so good. So for this great faithfulness to God, he's actually kind of publicly accused of being against the state and the government because he's calling out their sins, because God tells him to. And so Jeremiah gets thrown into this cistern. It's like a big pit where they're going to draw water or store things, just so he can die there. And then, thankfully, he is rescued, but not before the officials tell the king, this man should be put to death. He's demoralizing the soldiers. He's not interested in the welfare of our people. You notice how they spin his words. This happens, right? Sometimes being faithful to God doesn't always result in the way we'd hope. Because sometimes God's truth just isn't easy for people to hear, especially when it invites change in a person's behavior. It can happen pretty regularly that a greedy person doesn't want to hear about God's call to share what they have. Or a dishonest person isn't really always happy to be made aware that lying is a sin. A lazy person usually isn't really excited to know that God is inviting them to push themselves a little more to accomplish more good. And an angry person isn't always ready to calmly receive God's call to be patient, gentle, and calm when things don't go their way. A person who is resentful and holding grudges will not usually respond the best to an invitation to forgive someone who wronged them, and so on. And this is where all the division comes from. Hearts not receptive to God's teaching. Pope Benedict XVI explained this whole dynamic very well. He said, Christ brings division because he changes our values, priorities, and allegiances. The gospel demands a decision that can sometimes separate us even from those we love most. Now again, we don't want that division. No one's looking for that, but tragically it can happen. But here Jesus is saying it would be better if 2 or 3 family members out of 5 chose to accept Jesus' teachings, rather than all 5 rejecting. That might look like unity, but it's not a healthy one. So we can imagine how if some people of a household accept Jesus' teachings and the others don't, there will be division. There could be division between friends or family about the right way to deal with something, and that division could stem from different views on the teachings of Jesus. But again, remember, this division is still ultimately better than the situation before, where perhaps everyone thought dishonesty or being resentful was a good thing. So Jesus knows it won't always be well received, but he doesn't want division as a real goal. As disciples or students striving to be faithful to Jesus, we sometimes need to hear that invitation from the second reading from Hebrews to persevere in running the race that lies before us while keeping our eyes fixed on Jesus. Because running this race of following Jesus will sometimes mean discomfort. It won't always make us popular in a certain circumstance. But that's not the goal for our life. Rather, it should be to love God and neighbor by doing the right thing. Now, sometimes following Jesus with authenticity will mean standing apart from the crowd. And that can honestly be pretty scary sometimes for a lot of people. People want to fit in, not stand out. But the truth is, even when we do have to stand out a bit from the crowd by following Jesus, we find that deep within, we finally have the real, lasting interior peace we were looking for, even when not everyone agrees with us. This is a sign of God at work in our lives. The Catechism of the Catholic Church, which summarizes our faith, says that the way of Christ leads to life, but it is narrow and demanding. There it's referring to Jesus' own words. There is no discipleship without renunciation and a deliberate choice to follow Christ. In other words, if we really choose Christ, we will sometimes find others don't always agree. But does that mean we shouldn't choose Christ? No, we should still follow Jesus. So again, why would Jesus, who prayed for unity among his followers, speak of bringing division? Because only authentic unity can be built on truth. But truth is not always well received. And Jesus doesn't want superficial peace that ignores injustice or sin. He wants real peace, real love that comes from people walking together in his teachings. And so, St. Augustine taught that Christ came to separate what was falsely united and unite what was wrongly separated. So for us, this means that we are to recognize that authentic faith in Jesus will at times make us at odds with someone else's view. Are we okay with that? Are we able to acknowledge that and look at the others through Christ's eyes and even love Jesus so much to put him first in this way? And perhaps down the road, you never know, maybe our example will really be part of the way others come to know Jesus and find the happiness they're looking for too. The truth is, though, when we stand up for the inherent value of every human life, or the biblical definition of marriage, we might not always be agreed with. But we never stand alone, because Jesus, the saints, our guardian angels, and countless Christians are standing with us too. Jesus also says, "Blessed are the peacemakers." We don't want to cause division. We try to be sowers of peace and joy. But we cannot do so at the expense of truth or authentic love that would never be actually worthy of the name love, nor would it be real peace. So here's to summarize. Christ's teaching refines, yet his truth can divide, exposing in hearts where sin may still hide. Like Jeremiah, we too must be strong, though the world might sometimes claim that we're wrong. True peace is more than just outward show. It blooms where hearts let God's truth and love grow. Peaceful in strife, may our eyes always stay fixed firmly on Jesus, the truth and the way.